Let's talk about its potential impact with Luke Coffey. He is the director of the Foreign Policy Center at the Heritage Foundation, a conservative public policy firm here in Washington, D.C. So, Luke, it seems everyone but the Kurds concerned about the outcome. Turkey calls it illegal. How do you see this playing out in the coming days and weeks ahead?
Well, for domestic consumption, a lot of these countries like Turkey and Iran, they have to take a very robust stance against the idea of Kurdish independence. But I think President Erdogan is going to come around on this issue over time. I think he's a pragmatist, and he understands that having a united and strong Kurdish regional government is ultimately in the interests of Turkey. So while we hear all this rhetoric now, it doesn't alarm me too much at this stage, although it could get very complicated very quickly, as we heard in the previous segments. But I think we need to all take a deep breath and then address the situation in the coming days.
So, there is the issue of stability in the region. What are the best and worst case scenarios here?
Well, the best case scenario is that everyone comes to their senses and the government of the KRG and the central government in Baghdad come to some sort of an arrangement that sees eventual independence for the Kurdish regional government. The self-determination is a very powerful force, and it's inevitable that someday the Kurds will become independent. It's how it happens is what's going to determine the future stability of the Middle East. The worst case scenario is that the central government in Baghdad sends the Iraqi security forces to try to take Kirkuk, or even worse, go further into the non-disputed areas of the Kurdish regional government. And this will really stir up a hornet's nest. And right now, with ISIS on the back foot, with Mosul finally liberated, now is not the time for the government in Baghdad to stir up this hornet's nest with the Kurds. I think cooler heads need to prevail, and there needs to be some coordination and cooperation at a regional level.
You mentioned the fight against ISIS. So from the U.S. perspective, how would this affect allies and U.S. relationships in the region, especially when it comes to the war on ISIS and the ongoing situation in Syria?
Well, if I was a Kurd, I would, an Iraqi Kurd, I should specify, I would find the U.S. policy position on this very curious. In Syria, the U.S. is willing to support the Syrian Kurds, the YPG, which has its ideological roots in Marxism and has links to the terror organization PKK. But yet the Iraqi Kurds, which have been staunch allies of the U.S. for years, are left high and dry because they want to express their desire for self-determination. I think that the U.S. needs to play an important role in all of this, and I think the U.S. needs to play a role in getting all sides involved in Iraq to reach a negotiated settlement about Kurdistan. But at the end of the day, what we saw during this vote was a very clear expression and desire for many Kurds, 93% in fact, to become independent. And the U.S. should at least acknowledge that there is this desire inside the Kurdish regional government to become independent and not pretend like this vote never took place.
And it seems independence is what is concerning to some of the other countries in the neighborhood. So what is the likelihood of seeing other Kurd independence movements in some of the other countries there?
Well, I would say it's highly unlikely in Turkey and Iran for a whole host of reasons. We have to remember that the Iraqi Kurds already have a very strong degree of autonomy inside the government anyway, so they enjoy a special political status that the Iranian Kurds, the Turkish Kurds do not enjoy. But if you look at what's happening in Syria, the Syrian Kurds are carving out a piece of territory for themselves, and they're doing it by force, and they're doing it against ISIS. So the future of the Syrian Kurds in this sense remains to be seen, but it's likely the Syrian Kurds will also get some sort of special autonomy or special independence status inside Syria.
All right, Luke Coffey, we appreciate your perspective. Thank you for joining us.